So bef this I just wanted to discuss a couple ways for you to be able to test and debug your apps. And before we go on with the introduction to QML for the rest of the day, uh, the things I want to cover is for testing. I'm not going to repeat what we have done in the previous day, but I just want to say that you can test using AppStudio Player. And then I'm going to show you a few virtual devices tool that you can test your app with. And also for debugging, I wanted to show you a remote console and also a way to debug your app in Qt Creator. Uh, Just a quick recap, AppStudio Player, as we said, you can play your app instantly, test your app in multiple platforms. You get feedback quickly. You can also customize your player to work with enterprise. Uh, the way to do it, you can just upload and download it back in into the player. Works with ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise. And again, you can test this quickly in all of the platform without even needing to create a build or making the installation file. Just use the AppStudio Player. The next thing that I want to cover is something called a virtual device tool. Uh, just to set a stage here that when we create an app for mobile devices, there are so many different type of mobile devices. We have iOS, different types of iPhone and iPads. We have Androids. There are so many brands from, Samsung to Huawei, and there are advantages and disadvantages to test on real device and in the virtual device. So if we test something on real device, it's fast, especially if you use the AppStudio Player, it's even faster. You're testing it on a real environment. You can test the sensor if you're connecting to something or device capability. Uh, the problem with that is that the problem with testing with a device is that even in S3 for us, we work with mobile devices. We create a lot of app as a big company. We don't have all of the devices. We have a limited availability of the device. So it's a challenge. Sometimes we get an issue saying that we are seeing a specific issue on specific device, specific brand. So sometimes we don't have that. And there's also, even if you have the device, for example, for iOS, and you have that specific iPhone, but you have upgraded that iOS version into something higher, and we can't go back and we can't test it, and it is expensive to have that many devices. So with that disadvantages, there is an option to use a virtual device, quote unquote virtual, that can simulate how that specific make and model work. You can install different operating system. It's free, and it's easy to do a UI testing. But it also comes with disadvantages because it's slow. It's slower because it's running a simulation on top of your computer, and stuff like if you want to test if this specific functionality consume a lot of battery, we can't test that in virtual device. Uh, it's also hard to connect to a sensor using the simulator or emulator. It also requires special hardware for Android specifically. So there are I mentioned a couple terms, simulator and emulator. For iOS specific, Apple specific device, they call that iOS simulator. It's only available if you're running on macOS. You need to install a program called Xcode, which is Apple own uh, development environment. By installing the Xcode, then if you have AppStudio Desktop, and AppStudio Desktop will pick up all of the simulator, iOS simulator that you have installed on your computer. I'm going to show you this after I explain it. So basically, you will have all of the iOS simulator that is available in that computer from AppStudio Desktop. Then you can launch that simulator. The simulator will actually launch the player, and the AppStudio Player would have access to all of your apps on that computer. So that's how it works. And for Android, the terms that they're using is emulator. So it's a little bit different. Simulator, iOS simulator just simply simulate the software side of thing. Emulator simulates both hardware and the software. The way to install that, the way to install the emulator, we need to install an Android Studio, which is a native Android development. So this one for Android, you can install it on variety of different operating system. You can do it in Mac OS, Windows, or Linux. So it works the same way for AppStudio Desktop. If you have that installed, we will pick it up automatically, and you can select and launch uh, the the emulator, and then it runs the app inside the player. Just a quick step on the install Android simulator. You install the Android Studio first, and there is a tool that you need to install, which is the AVD Manager. And then from there, you install the specific device and hardware that you want, and then you create an image of a specific operating system. And then after that, you can choose if you want to have any graphics that is installed in the device and all of the options that's available. So with that, I'm going to go back to my desktop to try to show the iOS emulator that I have. So I'm going to bring this in here. So can everyone see my AppStudio desktop? So as I said, if you have already installed the Xcode, you would have the iOS simulator automatically populated here. So it just picks up what you have installed in your desktop. And then for Android, since I'm running this on my Mac machine, I would have access to both iOS simulator and Android simulator. For the purpose of the sample, I installed the Pixel XL emulator yesterday, so that to show that there's if you have multiple, it'll be shown here. So the way it works that you just click which emulator that you want, and then the emulator would boot up, and then after that it would I think it's just crashed maybe. Oh no. So the emulator would boot up, and then it would run an AppStudio Player, and the AppStudio Player would have access to your app. While this is booting up, we can come back to it, and then I'm gonna go back to my slide. Oh, this is done. So this is the simulator. The simulator would open the AppStudio Player, and then the AppStudio Player would share the same app folder with your AppStudio desktop. Then you have access to your app, and you can play. So then you can play. This is the Hospital Finder app that we created last week. We can start this, and then it will run here. So you would be able to see how the UI of your app looks like on a specific device. For example, iPhone 5s, it's very hard to come by this day. So if you want to see how it looks like, it's easy to just take a look at it on a simulator. All right. Next one. I've talked about a way of that testing. I covered everything. We have AppStudio Player, and then we also have the virtual device tool. The virtual device tool way, AppStudio Player is specific for AppStudio. That's how we came up with a way to quickly test an app, which I think a really magical tool. And the virtual device tool has been around with the native app development. So if you are used to developing app in for iOS natively or Android natively, that's how those people, those how the developer has been testing their app. Either they have their own real device or they're testing it on the emulator or in this or in the simulator. So I wanted to step into a different topic quickly, which is debugging. So we have two ways. I categorize it in two ways to debug your app. One's using a remote console tool. One's using Qt Creator. They are totally in a different realm. Remote console tool is testing the app when it is running remotely, when it is running on your phone, and then you wanted to see some error messages, some messages that you print, and you wanted to see what's going on with your app. The Qt Creator is more of a debugging tool that you see in your development machine, that is in the IDE on your desktop while you're working on the app. You can see some messages, error messages, or messages that you purposely print to see how your app is working. So for the remote console tool, you need to use the AppStudio Player. Again, this is why the AppStudio Player is a very crucial tool in AppStudio app development. As you see here, you start a remote console tool window in AppStudio Desktop that will present you with a QR code. The QR code that basically uh, a link a link that points to the IP address of the current machine that you're running on. And then you would open the AppStudio Player. You select the, maybe we have some background noise. So you would select the AppStudio Player, and then you either scan the QR code or you put in the IP address of the desktop, and then it would connect with the listening port. Please note that in order for this to work, both of the AppStudio desktop, meaning your computer, and your AppStudio Player, the mobile device, needs to be in the same network. This running using LAN. So I'm going to also show how this is done. I'm going to bring over my AppStudio desktop again. And so this is the AppStudio desktop. The way to launch the remote desktop, the remote console is that menu on the top left corner next to the AppStudio logo. If you click on that, it would open another window that would present you. I have this already connected, but I can. So this is the console window that has a QR code. This QR code is basically the URL link to this IP address. And I'm going to open my AppStudio, my phone, which is in the movie recording on iOS. So on the right is my iPhone, on the left is the console. So the way to start the console log on AppStudio Player is to go to the side menu. And if you don't see the connect remote console menu on the left, that means that you have not enabled the developer mode. So this is one of the tools that comes under developer mode. People who would just simply using the AppStudio Player for testing or for playing the app would not need this tool. So we hide it under developer tools, but that's by default off. So you need to enable that. Once you enable that, then you would have the menus that says connect remote console. So you do that, and then you can say scan QR code. And then I'm going to scan this. Then once I scan the QR code, you would see that it is, so let me see, I have to change. You would see the messages. So if it doesn't, so as you can see here that it gets the system log and then the IP address, and then the listening port. If for some reason I that that doesn't work, you can enter the IP address yourself. If you're familiar with how the syslog work, what it does is that uh, there are also a third-party software, for example, Logly, if you're familiar, and then you have that set up, you should be able to also put that URL here. So it not only can connect to the remote desktop, it also can connect to uh, a, a third-party web service for you to do a syslog.
Erwin, I
Yep.
missed the part where you generated. How did you get the QR code for the particular app?
the the QR code is auto-generated on AppStudio Desktop. So I can so let me hide my phone first. So the way to open you need the QR code that's generated from your desktop. So you click on the console, which is on the top left corner here, next to the AppStudio logo. So if I click that, it would open a new window called AppStudio Console. Uh, the QR code that we need is on the top left corner. So if you're at home, if your home network is quite simple, if you connect
I got you.
your desktop and your mobile phone on the same router, then I think that should work. So if you notice that I have uh, many IP address, for example, if I select this and then I change the port, the QR code should change to reflect this new link, this new IP address and the port that was just been created. So by doing that, you can see all of the error message, and let me connect to the internal.
Excuse me, Arvind.
Yep.
Just want to ask, so for each application, there is a specific QR code,
Oh,
right? Which is
no, no,
generated on the fly.
no. The QR code is specific for each desktop. The QR code is the client that's receiving uh, the whole AppStudio player would only to connect to one QR code. I think the QR code that we talked about last time was different QR code. So as you can see, I just scan the QR code from the Studio Player using. So maybe it's a little bit confusing with the scan QR code on the top there. That scan QR code, I mean, it will work both way, depending on which you're. I mean, I know I'm making it even more confusing. It will work both way, but the first the first menu right below the sign out, it's meant to scan this QR code that we generate from the app. So this is the QR code per app. Every app has a QR code that's technically just an ArcGIS online link that you use to scan from your AppStudio player to open to be open in your play in AppStudio player. I hope that's clear. That's we covered that yesterday. The one that I am talking about today is a different QR code, which is technically representing a link of an IP address with the listening port of this remote console client that I scan from the Connect Remote Console menu that can only be seen if you have the developer mode enabled. So now I'm connected. If you see, I have a syslog 10.29.76.35.514, and then it's the same IP address that I'm connecting to. As you can see, I have the messages coming in from my app, and then I click on one of the app sample, and then I think I know this app doesn't have any. I can try this, and as you can see, I have more error messages that's coming in. Uh, so if you create a console log on your desktop, on your code, it will see it here. So which we are going to do right after this. That includes in the on the next demo that I'm going to show you. I hope this is clear. Let's move on to the next one. So now I talked about the remote console, and the next debugging tips that I wanted to share with you it's all of the debugging tips that you can use in the Qt Creator, meaning that all of the things that you can do in your development machine. So we covered this yesterday. You can open it and then through the edit button, and then you can see the console log message, and there's a full debugging. So let me open that. I want to. So let's say this is the hospital finder app that we create last week. Or even the change color. We can start with something a little easier. So just to refresh the memory, we can open using the edit button. It will open the Qt Creator application that loads the source code of the app. So now, as you can see here, that I have something. I don't have anything, so what I could do here. I'll run the app first. This is a small sample that we created yesterday. You've already seen all of this console log, but this is all generated from the compiler. So if we click on this button, it changed the background. If we click on the button, it changed the background again. So what we want to do here, we are going to add a console log message to say that we are now changing it to red. So I can type console.log changing from green to red. And on the next one, I could type console.log changing from red to green. So now when I run this app, and when I want you to pay attention to the bottom of my screen where the AppStudio run, I'm going to make it bigger. So when I click this button, we can see that the console log is coming out, changing from green to red. And if you run this using remote console inside the player, you would see the same message. This message would appear in that console log. So you know, like when you put a console log on a trigger of a button or a trigger event, you know that that's happening, and then you can see it going on in the console log. If I click again, it says changing from green to red. If you're familiar with JavaScript, this is not just a simple string. You can do some cool stuff. For example, changing. You can type my rectangle dot color. You could construct this string, for example, like this. And to green. So it's the same message, but the color is coming from a variable name. So often case you like to print out a variable name, or what's going on, what is the value of what is the value of this specific variable at this point of time. And with that, I'm going to segue this presentation into a different debugging capability that we have. So if you notice that we use this triangle green button on the top left corner that say run. But you can also do it. You can also run this app as debugging. So if you click on this, the app would be running in the debugger mode. So I forgot to put a breakpoint. So let me close this and do it again. So the way it works is that you can put a breakpoint when something has happened. So I'm going to put a breakpoint here. I want to know, I want to stop the process of the whole code when it hits this specific line of code. So I want to know what's going on there. So I put a breakpoint there. Maybe I'll put a breakpoint on another one when it's changing on to a different color. So now I'm going to run this app using a debugging. And now it runs because it hasn't hit this code yet. And also when I click this, it knows that now the the color is still the same way. So I'm going to put the so now you can see that everything is stopped, and then now we know what's going on in this point of view. Whether we click that button, whether our if statement condition met, and then it would stop at that point, and then you can see everything else going on, and then you can let it go also. And then you can also see just like any other full IDE, you can see you can watch the value of the you can watch the value and watch the value changes. I think that's what I wanted to cover for today. There are a few other tips that I want to cover, but maybe it's too soon now to say. But this is should be helpful when you're starting to get into QML right after this with Brooke. So I'm going to go back to my slide to see if I missed anything else. All right, there's another thing that I wanted to show, but it's not part of the testing and the debugging. I know some people have asked yesterday, last week, about a different IDE that we support. We do support a different IDE, which is a Visual Studio Code. We create an extension for AppStudio for Visual Studio Code so that you can run QML and AppStudio apps. So the way to do it is to so let me open the AppStudio desktop again. The way to first you have to before all of this you have to have install the Visual Studio Code first. You have it installed, and then after you install it, you would choose the editors in the AppStudio preference. The AppStudio preference is where you can change whether you want light theme, dark theme, where the side panel is. On the last option, you can choose what editor, and then when you choose the editor, you choose the Visual Studio Code. You have to specify the executable path of the Visual Studio Code. For example, I have the Visual Studio Code here that I've already specified. So now I have that selected. Now when I click edit, it's also already know that it says edit in Visual Studio Code, and then I click edit, it would open Visual Studio Code and then load the source code of this app. And inside the Visual Studio Code, just make sure that you have the AppStudio for ArcGIS extension installed. So you need this extension to be able to do, for example, run, make you with this extension install, it it gives you the color all of this coloring, auto complete, and then you can open setting, you can upload this app, you can run, make, and all of the tools that you have in the Acute Creator IDE. The one thing about the Visual Studio Code, we don't have full debugging capability, meaning that you cannot put a breakpoint here. the reason we have this here is just for flavor. I mean, we know that out there are a lot of people who are used to a specific IDE. Visual Studio Code is one of the uh, top one out there. So we went ahead and created an extension so that you can still use your favorite IDE and create an AppStudio app.
And
It's
Erwin,
yep,
I was going to mention that, the team for many years developed apps and worked with apps without having debugging
yep,
in Qt Creator. So
right.
it's totally possible to, I mean, it's still, most of our users still, I don't think, use the debugging in Qt Creator. They just use console or other ways of kind of debugging their code. So it's totally
Yep.
possible to use that tool if that's what you prefer, if that's your preferred IDE that you use and you're familiar with it.
Our lead developer in Survey 123 often say that console log is the first and still the most effective debugging tools out there. The debugger breakpoint, I think, comes later, and it's a luxury for him. So that's what I wanted to cover for today. We can probably open the time a little bit for question while Brooke is getting ready for her presentation.
I have a
Just
question.
in the comments, Matt Stainer said that they love using Visual Studio. They love the Visual Studio code integration. Thanks for making it available. We edit our code in Visual Studio and run it from there, and then switch to Qt Creator for debugging.
Ah,
So yeah, if that's what you're using, if it's what you're used to, and you like those tools, they're very nice. Yeah, you can do that.
I have a question.
yep.
Can you go back to connecting the phone to the QR code?
Yeah, sure. You mind if I take over for just a minute, Brooke?
Sure. Go ahead. I think I stopped sharing.
Yeah. All right. So this is my AppStudio desktop, and this is my phone. So first, you want to open up the console, right? So this need to be on first, and this is my phone on the right. And on your phone, you want to open the side menu. And if you have the developer mode on, you would see an option to connect remote console. Connect remote console, and then if you tap on it, there's an option to scan QR code. I know this QR code, there are so many QR code. The QR code is just a way to simplify typing. We want to we want you to not need to type all of the IP address and port, and so that's why we have auto-generated QR code so that you can just scan it, and then it would auto-populate the IP address and the port.
Okay, so how do you run it?
So now I click on the, so now if you see on my phone, I click on the scan QR code. It opens a camera, and I go and connect. Oh, let me see if it's connected to internal. It is connecting to internal, so let me kill this and run it again. Is it not showing, the messages is not coming out in your,
There's no results.
right? All right, so let me try again. So oftentimes, I'm not sure what's going on. It was connecting. Maybe I have to kill my. So let me kill my phone, my player, and then try to connect again. So is your phone and the desktop are connecting to the same network, right?
I'm not sure. I need to
Oh.
troubleshoot that.
Oh, yeah, here we go. Sorry. So the first requirement is you need to, so the desktop, I'm connecting through a wire here, and the phone AppStudio Player needs to connect to the same quote unquote router.
I think to be safe, if you had a phone, I would turn off your cellular
LTE.
cellular capabilities. Just turn on Wi-Fi and make sure your machine and your phone are on the same Wi-Fi. And that's the first place to probably start to make
Yep.
sure they're communicating and see each
Yep.
other.